The Relocate with Revenue podcast.
Since 2020, a quarter of your savings account has been quietly erased.
Just gone.
Yeah, completely gone. And your bank didn't even, send you a notification about it.
Right.
I mean, think about that for a second. You get your paycheck, you cover your living expenses, and then you diligently take a portion of what is left and you move it over into a savings account.
Like a responsible adult.
Exactly. You are sacrificing your present enjoyment, you're skipping vacations, maybe holding off on upgrading your car, all for the sake of this future security.
Right.
You're playing by the rules.
Or at least the rules you were taught.
Right. But month after month, you look at the cost of housing, the price of groceries, just the raw expense of simply existing right now, and you realize something terrifying.
The math isn't mathing anymore.
No, it's not. The financial finish line isn't just moving. It feels like it is actively sprinting away from you.
Yeah, and that profound exhaustion you're describing, it's a symptom of a systemic mathematical reality. We are conditioned from childhood that accumulation is the ultimate goal. But the fundamental problem arises when the very mechanism of that accumulation is structurally flawed.
Well, and that brings us to today's focus. We are taking a deep dive into an incredibly eye-opening script today. It's titled Savings Won't Save You. And it was written by Rowe, who is the founder of the platform relocatewithrevenue.com.
It's a fascinating piece of work.
It really is. And the primary mission for this deep dive is to completely deconstruct that traditional, almost sacred mantra of save more, spend less. Rowe's thesis is that this entire model is just broken.
Completely broke.
Yeah. Instead of a safe harbor, your traditional savings account is basically suffering from 4 distinct quiet bleeds. And these bleeds are constantly draining your resources while you're, looking the other way.
And Rowe is demanding a massive paradigm shift from the reader here. And really, from you, the listener. We're moving far past the superficial advice of just, finding a better high-yield savings account.
Right. Chasing an extra 0.5%.
Exactly. We have to address a structural misunderstanding of what capital is currently doing in the modern global economy. Because passive hoarding, it's just no longer a viable strategy for security.
I kept picturing a very specific scenario while I was reading through the source material. It's like you're running on a treadmill.
Okay.
You're putting in the effort, you're sweating, doing all the hard work to reach a specific distance, but someone else is standing behind the control panel and they are secretly turning up the speed and they're increasing the incline while you're running.
That's a brutal image, but it's so accurate.
Right. You're burning twice the calories just to stay in the exact same place on the belt, and eventually your legs are just going to give out.
They have to.
And that is why Rowe's core philosophy is so striking to me. The script explicitly states, and I quote, "Income first, freedom always." It completely inverts the traditional saving model we've all been sold.
And that inversion is necessary because the traditional model relies on this assumption of a static world.
What do you mean by static?
Well, it requires you to believe that the dollar you save today will retain its current, thermodynamic energy, its buying power, a full decade from now. And Rowe meticulously points out that this is just a dangerous fantasy.
It really is.
If we want to understand international relocation or lifestyle design or, achieving actual financial freedom, we first have to understand the invisible mechanics of why our money is vanishing while it literally just sits completely still in a vault. We have to examine these 4 bleeds.
Okay, so let's jump right into the deep end with the first bleed, which Rowe identifies as inflation. Now, obviously, we constantly hear the word inflation thrown around on financial news networks.
Oh, endlessly. It's a buzzword.
Right. But Rowe details the harsh mathematics of what is actually happening right now, today, in 2026. Since 2020, the U.S. dollar has lost roughly 25% of its purchasing power.
Just let that sink in. 25%.
It's staggering. And Rowe is adamant that this isn't, sensationalism. It's just mathematical fact. Groceries, rent, building materials, they require at least 25% more currency to acquire than they did just 5 years ago.
Yeah, and human psychology notoriously struggles to process abstract macroeconomic percentages like that.
Oh, for sure.
So we really need to ground this in the exact scenario Rowe provides. Let's assume you were incredibly disciplined, right? And you managed to save $100,000 by the year 2020.
Okay, a huge milestone.
Huge. You celebrated it. You felt this sense of isolation for the world. But today, in 2026, that $100,000 only has the effective buying power of roughly $75,000.
See, and the terrifying part of that is that the number on the screen still says $100,000 when you log into your banking app.
Exactly. There's no visual indicator of the loss.
Right. It's not like the app pops up and says, hey, you're down 25 grand.
No, and that visual consistency is exactly what creates the cognitive dissonance for people.
Right.
You didn't physically lose the capital in like a disastrous stock trade or a real estate market collapse.
Yeah.
The purchasing power was extracted from you quietly, incrementally,
No.
just fraction of a cent by fraction of a cent. And this is where the traditional advice of just saving more becomes mathematically catastrophic.
And you can't outsave the leak.
Exactly. Rowe highlights that the average American savings rate currently sits at a meager 1% to 3%. Yet real-world inflation on essential items, the things you actually need to survive, is running between 4% and 8%.
Okay, let's pause on that spread for a second, because I want to understand the mechanics of how the government calculates this versus what we actually experience day to day.
Yeah, the CPI.
Right, the official consumer price index. It often reports inflation at a much lower number than 8%. Why is there such a massive disconnect between the government's official inflation number and the reality that Rowe is presenting in the script?
Well, the disconnect stems entirely from how the CPI is mechanically constructed. The CPI uses a basket of goods to measure price changes over time.
Right, they check the price of eggs, milk, gas, that sort of thing.
Yes, but it employs something called substitution bias.
Substitution bias, what is that?
So if the price of beef skyrockets, the economists calculating the CPI assume that consumers are just going to substitute beef for a cheaper protein, like chicken.
Oh, wow. So they literally swap the items in the basket to make the math look better.
Exactly, they swap it. So the CPI might report a modest increase because the price of chicken didn't rise as much, but your actual standard of living, your ability to afford the beef you originally wanted, has drastically declined.
That feels almost deceptive.
It's highly engineered.
Yeah.
And furthermore, the CPI heavily manipulates the cost of housing through this concept called owner's equivalent rent, which frequently lags way behind real-time housing and real estate markets.
Oh, of course it does.
Yeah. So Rowe is looking at the raw, unadjusted cost of sustaining a modern life, which is heavily outpacing those officially massaged metrics.
So basically, you are earning maybe 3% in a high-yield savings account if you're incredibly lucky, but you're losing up to 8% in real-world purchasing power. You are just bleeding out.
You're bleeding out while actively congratulating yourself for being responsible.
Jeez.
I mean, think about what this means for long-term planning, particularly the FIRE movement.
Financial independence, retire early.
Exactly. Millions of people have calculated their quote-unquote freedom number based on the famous 4% withdrawal rule, assuming historical inflation averages of maybe 2% to 3%.
Right, they have their spreadsheets all mapped out.
But all of those spreadsheets are budgeted based on yesterday's buying power. Your future financial goals are mathematically obsolete before you even reach them. You're aiming for a target that has already moved several miles down the road.
You know, it's like looking at a car's fuel gauge before driving across the desert.
Right.
You look at the dashboard, the gauge reads full, and you calculate that, okay, I can safely make it 400 miles to the next city, but there's a malfunction in the engine's fuel injector.
Uh-oh.
Right. It is secretly burning double the gas just to propel the car the same distance. The gauge on the dashboard is just lying to you.
I love that analogy.
Thanks. Because you are going to end up stranded in the middle of nowhere simply because you trusted a metric that was completely disconnected from the physical reality of the engine's combustion.
The balance in your savings account is exactly that lying fuel gauge. It's telling you that you possess, say, 100,000 units of security, but the engine of the global economy requires a significantly higher volume of those units just to propel your life forward the same distance.
Because the rules changed.
Right. The underlying codes of the macroeconomic game, as Rowe points out, they're constantly being rewritten.
Which brings me to a question that honestly makes me a bit angry on behalf of the listener. If the system is structurally designed for our savings to lose ground, like if the math literally guarantees a net loss year over year, are we putting ourselves in active danger by blindly following the rules of save more, spend less?
The answer Rowe provides in the script is an unequivocal yes. The traditional advice makes you vulnerable specifically because it lulls you into this false sense of security.
You think you're safe?
Exactly. You believe you're building an impenetrable fortress, but you are actually constructing a sandcastle at low tide, completely ignoring the lunar cycle.
Wow.
You traded your finite time and labor for that money. And by parking it in a system structurally designed to slowly extract its value to service, national debt, you are making yourself a victim of macroeconomic forces you refuse to acknowledge.
And that structural extraction forces us to look past our local grocery store and examine the second bleed. Because while local inflation is eating away at the cost of your daily life, there is a secondary, much wider force working against the very unit of measurement we are trying to save.
Right, and we're moving into bleed number 2 here, currency devaluation. And Roe is incredibly careful to point out that this is not just an isolated American problem.
Right, it's not just the US dollar.
No, this is a global fiat phenomena.
Yeah, the source material explicitly lists the British pound, the Canadian dollar, and the Australian dollar as currencies that have all weakened globally. This is a massive systemic issue across major Western economies. And to illustrate this, Rowe uses the analogy of a slow leak. And I really want to break down the mechanics of this because it's so important.
Yeah, it's a great visualization. Rowe shifts our perspective away from the liquid inside the container to the structural integrity of the container itself.
Okay, break that down for me.
Imagine you spend a decade filling a water barrel. You are incredibly disciplined. Every single month, you add a bucket of water. You meticulously protect this barrel in your garage. But the barrel has a fundamental flaw. It is leaking, but not from a hole in the bottom where you easily spot a puddle on the floor.
Right.
The material of the barrel's walls is slightly porous.
Oh, wow.
So the water evaporates and just sort of seeps out through the sides. The water level keeps dropping very slowly, but consistently, regardless of how much new water you pour in.
And the most maddening part of all this is that the financial news networks literally announced that the container is leaking on live television.
They announce it every single day. The anchors get on TV and state, the US dollar has lost value today, or the British pound has lost significant ground against the euro or the yen.
Yeah, they have the little ticker scrolling at the bottom of the screen.
Exactly. But Rowe accurately identifies a massive psychological disconnect here. The general public entirely ignores this reporting.
Totally.
When people hear that a currency has weakened on the foreign exchange market, they just tune it out as abstract financial jargon. It feels like numbers flickering on a screen, entirely disconnected from their rent or their car payment or their groceries.
Because the number in their local bank account didn't change. If I had 10,000 British pounds yesterday and the pound weakened globally overnight, I log into my banking app this morning and I still see exactly 10,000 British pounds.
Yes. And that visual static is exactly why Rowe uses two specific words that are critical to internalize here. You are not saving wealth. You are saving a unit of measurement that is shrinking in relative space.
A unit of measurement.
Right. That unit is becoming worth less. And that's two separate words. Worth space less. It is not becoming worthless as one word, like completely devoid of value, like a hyperinflated currency in a collapsed state.
Like historical examples we've seen in places like Zimbabwe or Weimar Germany.
Exactly. It's not that extreme. It is just becoming worth less than it was 24 hours prior. Your savings are denominated in a currency that is actively losing its purchasing power relative to the rest of the world.
Okay, I'm going to challenge that premise on behalf of the listener right now. Because you might be sitting in Ohio or Yorkshire or Queensland thinking, sure, the dollar or the pound is weak on the global foreign exchange market, but I buy my milk down the street. I purchase my clothes at the local mall. I have absolutely no intention of ever traveling abroad, and I certainly don't plan on moving to another country. So why should I care about global conversion power if I never plan to leave my hometown?
It is the most common and dangerous assumption people make about personal finance. It represents a fundamental misunderstanding of modern global supply chains.
Okay, how so?
You do not live in a localized, hermetically sealed economic bubble. Let's trace the mechanics of that milk you buy down the street in Ohio, just as an example.
Okay, let's do it.
The truck that delivered that milk to your local grocery store. It runs on diesel fuel refined from oil that is priced globally.
Right.
The fertilizer used to grow the feed for the cows relies on chemical components imported from overseas. The microchip inside the smartphone you use to tap and pay for those groceries was manufactured in Taiwan, using raw materials mined in South America.
Oh, wow. Okay. So when the dollar weakens, it literally takes more dollars to buy all of those foreign components that make my local life possible.
That is the exact mechanism of imported inflation. The global commodities market does not care that you never plan to leave Ohio. Everything physical in your life is priced based on a massive global web of resources.
It's all connected.
It is. When the unit of measurement you hold in your local bank account shrinks in global value, your home country has to spend more of its weakened currency to import those critical goods, materials, and energy. And those massive corporations importing those goods, they do not absorb that loss out of the goodness of their hearts.
No, they pass it directly to the consumer at the local cash register.
Exactly. The slow leak in the walls of your container directly erodes your ability to sustain your local life, whether you ever cross a national border or not.
So even if I stay completely still, I'm absorbing the shockwaves of the foreign exchange market. That is genuinely unsettling.
It should be.
It's like discovering the foundation of your house is slowly sinking into a swamp and realizing that rearranging the furniture in the living room isn't going to stop the floor from collapsing.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Which leads us directly into the third bleed, where M. Rowe scales this concept up to a macroeconomic level that is honestly just intimidating. If our local currency is a leaking container, what are the most powerful, most informed financial entities on the planet doing with their containers?
Right, so we must examine bleed 3, dollar erosion on the macro stage. We're zooming way out from your personal checking account to the realm of global central banking and reserve currencies.
And the data M. Rowe presents here is stark, isn't it?
Undeniable. Historically, since the end of World War II and the Bretton Woods Agreement, the U.S. dollar has been the undisputed bedrock of global finance. But currently, the dollar's share of global reserves has fallen below 57%.
And the script heavily emphasizes that 57% is a 31-year low.
And a 31-year low represents a seismic structural shift in the global economy. Central banks around the world, the massive entities that dictate the monetary policy of sovereign nations, they are actively and methodically diversifying their holdings away from the U.S. dollar.
What are they moving into?
They are aggressively buying physical gold and shifting their sovereign reserves into other assets.
Macroeconomics can get incredibly dense and jargon-heavy, but M. Rowe provides a brilliant analogy here to help visualize this shift. The script suggests we imagine the U.S. dollar is not money, but rather a share of stock in a massive global corporation.
Let's run with that. Imagine a monolithic corporation called the U.S. dollar. For decades, shares in this company were the safest, most trusted, and most demanded asset on earth.
Everyone wanted to own it.
Everyone, every foreign government, central bank, and major financial institution practically clamored to hold shares in this company because global trade, especially the massive global oil trade, was conducted almost exclusively in these shares.
Right, the petrodollar system.
Exactly. That insatiable global demand is what gave the dollar its immense purchasing power and absolute stability for decades.
The narrative, however, is fundamentally fracturing. Imagine that slowly, without a massive press release, without a catastrophic stock market crash that makes the evening news. The largest, most conservative, most heavily capitalized shareholders in that company begin to quietly sell their shares.
And M. Rowe heavily emphasizes that this is not panic selling.
Right.
This is strategic, methodical repositioning. We have to analyze the actors here. Central banks are the most profoundly conservative financial institutions on earth.
They aren't logging onto Robinhood and day trading meme stock?
No, they do not day trade. They do not chase crypto yields or internet fads. They operate on decadal timelines, executing decisions backed by absolute armies of quantitative analysts.
So if the most conservative entities on the planet are slowly walking toward the exit, they must see structural weaknesses that the average person is completely blind to.
They are looking at the macroeconomic weather radar. They see geopolitical alliances shifting, such as the rise of the BRICS nations attempting to establish alternative trade settlement mechanisms completely outside of the dollar system.
Right, trying to bypass it entirely.
They see the weaponization of the SWIFT banking system. When these extremely conservative money managers start dumping dollars for gold, they are not reacting to a storm that has already passed. They're preparing for a massive storm that is forming on the horizon.
Wow.
They are moving their sovereign wealth to higher ground. And M. Rowe forces you to realize that your personal savings account is essentially just a single tiny share in that exact same company.
That realization completely shatters the illusion of a safe bank account. I mean, we treat our savings like an impenetrable vault. But if the bank itself, or rather the central banking system that backstops the entire economy, is frantically trying to hold something else besides the currency you're hoarding, your feeling of safety is entirely fabricated.
It is the ultimate financial hallucination. And M. Rowe introduces a phrase here that serves as one of the most profound insights in the entire blueprint, in my opinion.
What's that?
Rowe states that sitting still with cash in a bank account is a meditation position, not a currency one.
A meditation position. That is such a pucing way to describe traditional saving.
It really is. Because in the realm of global currency and capital preservation, neutral simply does not exist.
They're always moving in one direction or another.
Exactly. You are either acquiring leverage or you are leaking purchasing power. By doing nothing, by sitting in a financial meditation position and leaving your capital in a static account, you are making an active choice.
You're choosing to lose.
You are choosing to absorb the full concentrated impact of this macro-level erosion. You are stubbornly clutching your shares in the company while the board of directors is quietly liquidating their positions out the back door.
Okay, so the first three bleeds local inflation, global currency devaluation, and macro dollar erosion. They are systemic, deeply mathematical, and largely out of our individual control.
Right. But MRO then pivots to the fourth bleed. And this one fundamentally changes the tone of the script. This bleed is deeply personal. It is rooted in human psychology, our cultural conditioning, and how we view the finite timeline of our own lives.
Yeah, we're talking about bleed 4, the personal cost of waiting. It is the thief of time. Rowe argues that hoarding savings does not merely steal the purchasing power of your money, it aggressively steals your time.
It limits your choices.
It limits your optionality, and it entirely erases the alternate, elevated versions of a life that you continually postpone out of pure fear.
And it starts so early. From the moment we get our first allowance or our first paycheck as a teenager, society programs us to believe that the number is the destination. Everyone listening to this right now has a number in their head.
For sure. If I can just stockpile $50,000, I'll finally feel safe. Or if I can grind away until my retirement account hits $1 million, I will grant myself permission to finally relax. We treat the savings account as the ultimate finish line, but Rowe insists that savings should never be a destination. It should merely be a launch pad or a bridge to cross.
Rowe is effectively deconstructing the profound, almost paralyzing anxieties surrounding savings here. Just consider the psychological state of someone constantly chasing that target number. As soon as you get close to it, inflation moves the goalposts and the number required for safety increases.
Maddening.
Rowe argues that the systemic financial structure that created the concept of the target number in the first place also manufactured the anxiety you feel about it. We are culturally conditioned to believe that financial anxiety is a personal failure.
Like we just aren't working hard enough.
Exactly. That it's a signal that we simply need to work harder, pick up a side hustle, and save more.
But the script turns that completely upside down. Rowe says that anxiety is actually your intuition screaming at you that you are playing a rigged game.
The target number will never feel safe enough because subconsciously, your brain recognizes the container is leaking. You feel the finish line moving. Consequently, you continually delay your actual life.
You push everything off.
You postpone moving to a place you love. You delay launching the business you've been dreaming about for years. You postpone designing a lifestyle of actual freedom, all because you are waiting for a mathematical certainty that simply does not exist within a fiat currency system.
It is genuinely tragic when you think about it. People are trading the best, most vibrant, energetic, and capable decades of their lives, waiting for an illusion of absolute safety to materialize.
Yep.
It reminds me of sitting in an airport terminal. You're clutching your ticket, your bags are packed, but you refuse to board the plane because you're demanding a 100% guarantee from the pilot that there won't be any turbulence.
That's a great visual.
And meanwhile, the plane departs without you, and you spend your entire life sitting in the terminal eating overpriced pretzels.
Exactly.
So, practically speaking, how does the listener fix this? How do you take a lifetime of deep cultural programming that says hoard cash to survive and rewire your brain to view your savings as, in Rowe's exact words, an engine thruster for takeoff?
The rewiring process requires transitioning from a defensive posture to an offensive posture.
Okay, what does a defensive posture look like?
A defensive financial posture operates from pure scarcity. I must protect this shrinking pile of capital from the world at all costs. I have to hide it. An offensive posture, which Rowe heavily advocates in the RelocateWithRevenue.com blueprint, operates from leverage.
Leverage, right.
It says, this capital is a tool. It is stored thermodynamic energy. Its only true utility is to be deployed to acquire leverage, build systems, and generate new revenue.
So it's about movement.
Yes. The first step in reprogramming yourself is recognizing that the anxiety you feel when realizing your savings are bleeding isn't panic. It is clarity.
Oh.
You are finally seeing the economic chessboard as it truly is. You cross the bridge by accepting that capital is meant to be put to work, not buried in the backyard in a coffee can.
If savings is just a bridge, and the goal is to cross it to reach a superior setup, we really have to look at what that setup actually looks like in the real world. Which brings us to the mechanics of geo-arbitrage and the brutal reality of timing.
Timing is everything here.
Rowe doesn't just offer philosophical musings in this script. They provide concrete historical data on shrinking windows of opportunity across the globe.
Right. The data Rowe presents takes all these abstract concepts of currency devaluation and macroeconomic leverage we've been discussing and applies them directly to the physical cost of living.
Let's get into the weeds on these numbers.
Rowe introduces 3 specific currency windows to illustrate the massive financial divergence between taking immediate action and waiting around for elusive certainty.
Let's break down the mechanics of these specific economies because the numbers in the script are staggering. We will start with Kenya, specifically the capital, Nairobi. Rowe points out that between 2022 and early 2024, $1 bought approximately 160 to 163 Kenyan shillings.
And that exchange rate represented a massive, albeit temporary, geo-arbitrage window. During that specific 2-year period, the purchasing power of the US dollar in Kenya was absolutely extraordinary.
Like life-changing leverage.
Exactly. If you earned your income in dollars but paid your expenses in shillings, your cost of living just plummeted. Renting luxury apartments, hiring highly skilled local talent for your business, accessing top-tier private healthcare, everything was heavily discounted by the massive currency spread. You had incredible leverage over your environment.
But economies do not remain static. The script notes that today, in 2026, the exchange rate sits at around 129 shillings to the US dollar.
The window tightened.
Dramatically. That is a 15% contraction in your purchasing power over a very short time frame.
And we see the exact same mechanical tightening in the second example Rowe gives. Colombia, specifically Medellin.
Oh, Medellin has been huge for remote workers lately.
Massive. In 2023, the US dollar peaked at nearly 4,972 Colombian pesos. It became a global hotspot for digital nomads, specifically because the cost of living was deeply fractionalized by the incredible currency strength. But today, the rate sits at about 3,700 pesos to the dollar.
That is a 25% contraction from peak leverage. A quarter of your purchasing power just evaporated because the macroeconomic window closed.
That's what you were waiting.
Right. And the third example Rowe provides is Mexico. In November of 2025, just a short time ago, $1 bought almost 19 Mexican pesos. Today, it's hovering around 17 pesos. It is still a highly advantageous geo-arbitrage location for sure, but the leverage is noticeably reduced from its peak.
We need to analyze the underlying mechanics of why these windows open and close, because it isn't random.
What causes it?
A window often opens due to emerging market volatility or, sudden shifts in U.S. Federal Reserve interest rates. But why do they close? They close precisely because of capital influx.
Meaning too much money floods in.
Exactly. When a location like Medellin or Mexico City becomes highly leveraged for foreign capital, the early movers arrive. They bring U.S. dollars and euros. They inject massive amounts of foreign currency into the local economy.
I see.
And in places like Mexico, you also have nearshoring, where massive manufacturing corporations move their supply chains from China to Mexico to be geographically closer to the U.S. All of this foreign capital floods in, drastically increasing demand for the local currency, which in turn strengthens the peso or the shilling against the dollar. The very act of capital moving to these locations mechanically closes the arbitrage window.
And the early movers understand this mechanic perfectly. They arrive when the window is wide open. They use their savings as an engine thruster, like we talked about. They sign multi-year leases at the absolute bottom of the market. They buy local real estate, and they establish their business structures while their dollars are at absolute peak strength.
They lock it in.
They lock in the leverage before the massive wave of capital follows them.
And exactly the opposite happens to the people who wait. The individuals who stayed in their home countries, defensively hoarding their bleeding savings, waiting for articles in major publications to assure them the move was, quote-unquote, 100% safe.
Waiting for permission.
Yes. By the time the macroeconomic reality is mainstream news on CNN or Fox Business, the window has tightened. When the hesitant savers finally decide to execute the move, they end up paying a 15% to 25% premium to access the exact same lifestyle the early movers secured years prior. Their hesitation literally cost them a quarter of their wealth.
It is identical to the mechanics of gentrification in real estate.
Oh, 100%.
You see the artists moving into a dilapidated industrial neighborhood. You see a cool coffee shop open up. You have the capital to buy a building right then and there, but you tell yourself, I'm going to wait. I'll wait until the city builds a new train station, and I am 100% sure this neighborhood is a safe investment.
A classic mistake.
Right, because the moment the city actually announces the train station, the massive institutional developers swoop in, the property values skyrocket. By the time you feel safe enough to invest, the early adopters have already extracted all the financial upside, and you are paying a massive premium just to get your foot in the door. You demanded certainty, and the market charged you 25% for it.
That's it, exactly. Leverage has a strict shelf life.
Huh.
The purchasing power your savings holds today in a foreign market is a depreciating asset. Sitting in a domestic bank account while you wait for the perfect alignment of stars basically guarantees that you will miss the peak of your own capital strength.
Okay, so the historical data definitively proves that timing matters and that passively hoarding savings lacks any offensive leverage. However, this raises a massive practical hurdle for the listener.
Sure.
How do you actually execute an international move without simply draining your savings account in a cheaper country? You can't just move to Nairobi or Medellin, sit on a beach, slowly bleed out your capital and hope for the best.
No, absolutely not.
That isn't financial strategy. That is just going broke in a more pleasant climate.
And Emro is exceptionally clear about drawing this distinction in the script. The quote is, "This is not about moving to a cheap country. This is about understanding that your dollar has leverage right now. The physical relocation is not the ultimate solution. The relocation is merely the enabler of the solution."
That's a great distinction.
Which brings us to the core mechanism of what relocatewithrevenue.com actually provides. A blueprint focused entirely on building systems over hoarding savings.
Let's clarify what this platform is not, because the internet is flooded with terrible scammy advice on this topic.
Well, it's full of it.
Ro is not running a job-finding agency trying to get you hired by some foreign corporation. They are not selling a course on how to become a travel influencer living out of a backpack. The entire focus of the platform is on utilizing AI systems to architect revenue streams that fund a completely location-independent lifestyle. It is about active, systemic income generation.
Right. So let's detail the architecture of the specific offerings Ro outlines here, as it demonstrates the structural depth required to execute this lifestyle sustainably.
Let's go through the modules.
Relocate with Revenue offers an 82-page digital blueprint, and it's divided into 5 highly specific mechanical modules. Module 1 is the Income First framework, which sets the whole foundation.
Okay.
Module 2 covers relocation readiness, moving beyond just, packing your bags, to actual psychological and logistical preparation.
Which is huge.
Module 3 details the actual business structures required for a location-independent enterprise. Module 4 tackles the incredibly complex and vital world of cross-border personal and health insurance.
Because you can't just rely on your domestic plan.
Exactly.
Yep.
And finally, Module 5 provides a personal readiness score, which is an objective metric designed to basically strip away self-deception and tell you exactly where your blind spots are before you make a move.
Now, the element that truly fascinated me was the technological integration Ro has built here. They offer something called the Blueprint Mirror AI tool.
Yeah, this is brilliant.
The script explains this is a plugin you can upload into your preferred conversational AI, whether you utilize ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini. It allows you to run your highly personal, complex relocation strategy questions through an AI that has been specifically trained on the proprietary data of this 82-page blueprint.
It is a remarkable, highly functional application of artificial intelligence. We really need to dissect the underlying philosophy it enables, using revenue as a strategy versus the traditional model of using savings as a destination. The traditional mindset utilizes savings as a countdown clock. You stockpile until retirement, and then you pray you slowly consume that savings without running out of capital before you run out of life.
It's terrifying when you phrase it like that.
But it is fundamentally a mindset of scarcity and managed depletion.
But Ro's philosophy completely flips the mechanics. You take your savings, which we have firmly established as actively bleeding purchasing power domestically, and you deploy it as the initial thrust to move to a geo-arbitrage location.
Yes.
You utilize the geographical leverage to drastically slash your baseline cost of living. That reduction in overhead buys you time and mental bandwidth.
Crucial mental bandwidth.
Right. But the critical non-negotiable next step is that you immediately begin building digital, location-independent revenue systems. You do not move to a cheaper country to retire. You move to architect an environment where your capital can expand, compound, and multiply without being devoured by domestic inflation.
Exactly.
I have to challenge this setup, though, from a practical standpoint.
Go for it.
When we start throwing around terms like AI plugins, cross-border business structures, and international tax strategies, I know listeners are going to feel completely overwhelmed.
It sounds like a lot.
It sounds like you need a law degree. Isn't relying on an AI for international tax and legal structuring incredibly dangerous? Does integrating tools like the Blueprint Mirror AI into Claude actually democratize this lifestyle, or does it require a baseline of technical and legal savvy that most people simply don't possess? Are we just replacing financial vulnerability with legal vulnerability?
That is a very fair and crucial distinction to make. The AI is not functioning as your certified public accountant, nor is it legally binding counsel.
Okay, good.
What the Blueprint Mirror AI does is act as a structural roadmap consultant. Think about it 5 or 10 years ago. Simply understanding the framework of cross-border taxation, territorial tax systems, and foreign corporate structuring required retaining incredibly expensive international legal firms just to understand your basic options.
Right, you'd pay thousands just for a consultation.
Exactly. It was gated knowledge, restricted entirely to ultra-wealthy individuals or multinational corporations. By feeding a comprehensive, meticulously researched blueprint into an AI model, you are giving the average person access to bespoke, foundational guidance.
So it points you in the right direction.
It maps out the territory. It tells you which specific questions you need to ask a local tax professional when you get there. It explains the structural difference between a digital nomad visa and permanent residency.
That makes a lot of sense.
You don't need to be a Python coder or an international lawyer. You just need to be capable of having a plain language conversation with the AI to map out your initial strategy. The technology drastically lowers the barrier to entry, making the revenue-first strategy accessible to anyone willing to actually engage with the system.
That significantly reframes it for me. It takes the terrifying monolithic complexity of international relocation and breaks it down into an interactive, step-by-step conversation. It illuminates the path, making the leap feel mechanically possible rather than just a reckless gamble.
And that illumination is the entire objective of Erosion's message. It is designed to shatter the paralysis of waiting for perfect certainty.
Right.
You do not have to be ready to board a plane to Colombia tomorrow morning. But you must be ready to stop letting these massive macroeconomic leverage windows close while you sit passively in a meditation position, watching your primary unit of measurement shrink into irrelevance.
Let's synthesize the journey we have mapped out today, because we have covered a massive amount of macroeconomic territory in this deep dive.
You really have.
We started by uncovering the inescapable mathematical reality of the 4 hidden bleeds quietly draining your traditional savings accounts. We examined local inflation, the lying fuel gauge that has quietly extracted 25% of your purchasing power over the last 5 years while your bank paid you fractions of a penny in interest.
We moved into the mechanics of global currency devaluation, understanding the slow leak in the porous walls of the container. We explored how the actual unit of measurement you're attempting to save is becoming worth less on the foreign exchange market, driving up the cost of imported goods and inflating your local life, regardless of whether you ever cross a border.
We zoomed out to the macro level, witnessing dollar erosion on the global stage. We observed the most conservative financial institutions on the planet, central banks, quietly, strategically repositioning their sovereign reserves away from the US dollar and into gold, signaling a monumental shift in global monetary trust.
And perhaps most critically, we confronted the paralyzing personal cost of waiting. We recognized that hoarding capital out of culturally programmed anxiety steals the most vital, capable years of your life, chaining you to a moving financial target that will never feel safe enough to allow you to actually live.
Through it all, we unpacked Erosion's central thesis from relocatewithrevenue.com. Savings must be deployed as an engine thruster for leverage, not hoarded for a false sense of security. You must transition from a mindset of passive, defensive accumulation to active, offensive revenue generation.
It's a fundamental shift.
You utilize the bridge of your savings to cross over into a location-independent structure where your capital can expand and compound in a favorable economic environment.
It requires a radical structural rethinking of what financial security actually means in the 21st century. And the historical exchange rate data from emerging markets proves that the windows for maximum leverage are opening and tightening right now.
Before we wrap up, I want to drop a quick teaser for our listeners.
Oh, yes.
At the very end of the source material, MRO mentions what is coming next on their platform, and it sounds incredibly powerful. They're going to be exploring the best countries for digital nomads and location-independent entrepreneurs looking to utilize something called the zero tax plate.
The zero tax one, that's going to be a huge topic.
Right. This essentially involves legally establishing tax residency in nations that utilize territorial taxation, meaning they do not tax foreign-earned income. If the idea of radically and legally restructuring your tax burden while living abroad sounds appealing, that is definitely a topic we will be exploring in a future deep dive.
The mechanics of territorial taxation and the zero tax plate concept add an entirely new layer of massive financial leverage to the relocation strategy. We will certainly have to dissect the legal and structural architecture of that when Roe releases the new data.
As we close out today's deep dive, I want you to think back to that treadmill we talked about at the very beginning.
The one that's speeding up.
The one where macroeconomic forces are secretly turning up the speed and the incline while you exhaust yourself just trying to maintain your position.
We have established that the traditional concept of location-based security is fracturing fast. If sovereign nations are now actively competing for digital revenue, offering nomad visas and zero tax incentives to attract remote capital, it raises a profound question about the future of borders.
I mean, if artificial intelligence and digital blueprints can map out complex cross-border lives for the average person, empowering anyone to move their revenue streams globally.
Will citizenship eventually stop being an inherited geographic mandate and instead become a subscription service that you can simply cancel when the terms are no longer in your favor?